to mundo fine, night train to the end, running hard and running fast to meet my future and away from my past, taking the gamble that cannot last, night train to the end. Hell's ride to mundo fine, hell's ride to the end. Sold my soul to the devil's pen, he draws me hard with a merciless hand, and all I bought is a handful of sand, night train to the end.
Welcome to Frater SH's Night Show. I'm your host Sir Peter Pendragon, and this is the New Year's Eve edition of the show. Tonight we will have Phil Hancock, parapsychologist, and the topic will all be about werewolves. In news concerning Frater SH, he has been working on a major revision of his first two books. These books are the Holy Chronicle and the Esoteric Origin Theories. These two books are a massive 800 pages apiece. The first book is about finished with major work to begin soon on the second book. We will go to a break and then I will introduce the werewolf to you, and then Phil Hancock will discuss the various folklore.
Now available from lulu.com/FraterSH. The Esoteric Mystery Lectures. Presenting for the first time a massive collection of all of Frater's lectures on all things mysterious. From the origins of the human race to man's social revolution and growth on this planet, creating the very modern world as we know it. Symbolism and secrecy are discussed to the fullest with a lecture on the Illuminati. Also available, the Gnosis Gate book by Frater SH. The Gnosis Gate book is the definition of what a mystery school should be. It focuses on remote viewing, the lottery, philosophy, wisdom, the world's secrets, psychic lessons and many more. Before one can learn of very deep world secrets, one must understand themselves first. Many people are hurting and this is truly a hard world, and the first section of this book is devoted to psychology and self-help. Only once you understand yourself can you move forward into the waters of psychic powers and remote view the world. This is a edgy, controversial book that will not be forgotten anytime soon.
And now we return. A werewolf, or lycanthrope in folklore and mythology, is a person who shapeshifts into a wolf, either purposely, by using magic, or after being placed under a curse. The medieval chronicler Gervase of Tilbury associated the transformation with the appearance of the full moon, but this concept was rarely associated with the werewolf until the idea was picked up by modern fiction writers. Most modern references agree that a werewolf can be killed if shot by a silver bullet, although this is more a reflection of fiction's influence than an authentic feature of the folk legends. Werewolves are sometimes held to become vampires after death. Origins and variations of the word werewolf by Lucas Cranach de Royaltia, 1512. The name is thought most likely to derive from Old English or were, meaning man, male man rather than gender neutral, or possibly the Latin also meaning man, masculine. It has cognates in several Germanic languages including Gothic Wer, Old High German and Old Norse Va. The second element is *wu, or wolf, meaning simply wolf. The two elements joined thus yield man-wolf. The first element is thought to be representative of the hypothetical Proto-Indo-European roots *wro, meaning man. Also thought to be descended from this root are Latin, the Old Prussian, wires, and Irish, fear, pl, fur. An alternative etymology looks to Old English wary, to wear, plus wolf, thus bearing wearer of the wolf skin. Other sources believe it is derived from werewolf, where wag, or later wergendero, is cognate with Norse vag meaning wolf, and as vargulf means the kind of wolf that slaughters many of a flock or herd but eats only a bit. This was a serious problem for herders, as they had to somehow destroy the individual wolf that had run mad before it destroyed their entire flock or herd. They then used the wolf's hide as a decorative ornament in the bedroom of a young infant, believing it to give the baby supernatural powers. Wag by itself was used in Old English for that specific kind of wolf, see J.R.R. Tolkien's novel The Hobbit, and it was used as well for what would now be called a serial killer. The Greek term lycanthropy, a compound of which the first part derives from the same Proto-Indo-European root for wolf, *wu, as the English word, is also commonly used for the wolf, man transformation. The term for the metamorphosis of people into animals in general, rather than wolves specifically, is therianthropy. Therianthrope means beast-man. The term turnskin or turncoat is sometimes also used. The French name for a werewolf, sometimes used in English, is loup-garou, from the Latin noun lupus meaning wolf. The second element is thought to be from Old French garol meaning werewolf. This in turn is most likely from Frankish wolf meaning man-wolf. History of the werewolf. Many European countries and cultures have stories of werewolves, including France, loup-garou, Greece, lycanthropo, Spain, homolobo, Bulgaria, varkalak, vulgdlak, Czech Republic, vlkodlak, Serbia, vukdlak, Russia, oboroton, vodilak, Ukraine, vovkalak, vovkan, praverton, Croatia, vukdlak, Poland, wilkolak, Romania, vakolak, Scotland, werewolf, wulva, England, a wolf, Ireland, Filadorkenricht, Germany, a wolf, Denmark/Sweden, werewolf, Galicia, Portugal, lobison, lobisomum, Lithuania, Vilkalakis and Vilgatlakis, Latvia, Vilgatis and Vilkasais, Estonia, Librunt, Finland, Imisizae, Argentina, Lobison, Hombilobo, and Italy, Lupomanaro. In Northern Europe, there are also tales about people changing into bears. In Norse mythology, the legends of berserkers may be a source of the werewolf myths. Berserks were vicious fighters, dressed in bear or wolf hides due to their preference to quick movement rather than tough armor. They were immune to pain and killed viciously in battle, like a wild animal. The berserks specifically associated with wolves were known as Ulfna, wolf shirts. In Latvian mythology, the Vilkasais was a person changed into a wolf-like monster, though the Vilkasais was occasionally beneficial. A closely related set of myths are the skinwalkers. These myths probably have a common base in Proto-Indo-European society, where the class of young, unwed warriors were apparently associated with wolves. Shapeshifters similar to werewolves are common in myths from all over the world, though most of them involve animal forms other than wolves. In Greek mythology, the story of Lycaon supplies one of the earliest examples of a werewolf legend. According to one form of it, Lycaon was transformed into a wolf as a result of eating human flesh. One of those who were present at periodical sacrifice on Mount Lycaon was said to suffer a similar fate. The Roman Pliny the Elder, quoting Euans, says that a man of Antheu's family was selected by lot and brought to a lake in Arcadia, where he hung his clothing on an ash tree and swam across. This resulted in his being transformed into a wolf, and he wandered in this shape 9 years. Then, if he had attacked no human being, he was at liberty to swim back and resume his former shape. Probably the two stories are identical, though we hear nothing of participation in the Lycian sacrifice by the descendant of Antaeus. Herodotus in his histories tells that the Neri, a tribe he places to the northeast of Scythia, were annually transformed for a few days, and Virgil is familiar with transformation of human beings into wolves. In the novel Satyricon, written about year 60 by Gaius Petronius, one of the characters recites a story about a man who turns into a wolf during a full moon. There are women, so the Arminian belief runs, who in consequence of deadly sins are condemned to pass 7 years in the form of a wolf. A spirit comes to such a woman and brings her a wolf's skin. He orders her to put it on, and no sooner has she done this than the most frightful wolfish cravings make their appearance and soon get the upper hand. Her better nature conquered, she makes a meal of her own children, one by one, then of her relatives' children according to the degree of relationship, and finally the children of strangers begin to fall as prey to her. She wanders forth only at night, and doors and locks spring open at her approach. When morning draws near, she returns to human form and removes her wolf skin. In these cases the transformation was involuntary or virtually so. But side by side with this belief in involuntary metamorphosis, we find the belief that human beings can change themselves into animals at will and then resume their own form. In the Volsunga saga of Norse mythology, the hero Sigmund and his son Sinfjotli spent some time wearing cursed wolf skins, which transformed them into wolves. Belief in werewolves was so widespread that the Church made several attempts to eradicate it, including Canon Episcopan c. 900, which required penance for admitting to the belief. France in particular seems to have been infested with werewolves during the 16th century, and the consequent trials were very numerous. In some of the cases, those of the Gandailan family and the Jura, the Tailor of Chalons and Roulette in Angers, all occurring in the year 1598, there was clear evidence against the accused of murder and cannibalism, but none of association with wolves. In other cases, as that of Gilles Garnier in Dolan 1573, there was clear evidence against some wolf, but none against the accused. Yet while this lycanthropy fever, both of suspectors and of suspected, was at its height, it was decided in the case of Jean Grenier at Bordeaux in 1603 that lycanthropy was nothing more than an insane delusion. From this time the loup-garou gradually ceased to be regarded as a dangerous heretic, and fell back into his pre-Christian position of being simply a man-wolf fiend. The lubins or lupins of France were usually female and shy in contrast to the aggressive loup-garous. In Prussia, Livonia and Lithuania, according to the bishops Solaus Magnus and Majolis, the wolves were in the 16th century far more destructive than true and natural wolves, and their heterodoxy appears from the Catholic bishop's assertion that they formed an accursed college of those desirous of innovations contrary to the divine law. In England, however, where at the beginning of the 17th century the punishment of witchcraft was still zealously prosecuted by James I of England, the wolf had been so long extinct that Pius Monach was himself to regard werewolves as victims of delusion induced by a natural superabundance of melancholic. Only small creatures such as the cat, the hare and the weasel remained for the malignant sorcerer to transform himself into, but he was firmly believed to avail himself of these agencies. Many of the werewolves in European tradition were most innocent and God-fearing persons, who suffered through the witchcraft of others, or simply from an unhappy fate, and who as wolves behaved in a truly touching fashion, fawning upon and protecting their benefactors. In Marie de France's poem Bisclaveret, c. 1200, the nobleman Bisclaveret, for reasons not described in the lie, had to transform into a wolf every week. when his treacherous wife stole his clothing, needed to restore his human form, he escaped the king's wolf hunt by imploring the king for mercy, and accompanied the king thereafter. His behavior at court was so gentle and harmless that when his wife's new husband appeared at court and the king met his clever ex-wife near their home, his attacks on them were taken as revenge, and the truth was revealed. Others of this sort were Alphonse, the hero of William and the Werewolf, aka The Romance of William of Pallan, translated from French, Guillaume de Pallan, into English about 1350, and the numerous princes and princesses, knights and ladies, who appear temporarily in beast form in the German fairy tales, or Märchen. See Snow White and Rose Red, where the tame bear is really a bewitched prince, and the golden bird where the talking fox is also a man. Indeed, the power of transforming others into wild beasts was attributed not only to malignant sorcerers, but also to Christian saints. Omnes angeli, boni et mali, ex virtute naturally habent potestatem transmutandi corpora nostra. All angels, good and bad, have the power of transmutating our bodies, was the dictum of St. Thomas Aquinas. St. Patrick transformed Viridicus, our king in Wales, into a wolf, and St. Natalice cursed an illustrious Irish family with the result that each member of it was doomed to be a wolf for 7 years. In other tales the divine agency is still more direct, while in Russia, again, men are supposed to become werewolves through incurring the wrath of the devil. Some werewolf lore is based on documented events. The beast of Gévaudan was a creature that reportedly terrorized the general area of the French former province of Gévaudan, in today's Lozère department, in the Margeride Mountains in south-central France, in the general time frame of 1764 to 1767. It was often described as a giant wolf and was said to attack livestock and humans indiscriminately. In the late 1990s, a string of man-eating wolf attacks were reported in Uttar Pradesh, India. Frightened people claimed, among other things, that the wolves were werewolves. Becoming a werewolf. Historical legends describe a wide variety of methods for becoming a werewolf. One of the simplest was the removal of clothing and putting on a belt made of wolf skin, probably a substitute for the assumption of an entire animal skin, which also is frequently described. In other cases the body is rubbed with a magic salve. To drink water out of the footprint of the animal in question or to drink from certain enchanted streams were also considered effectual modes of accomplishing metamorphosis. Olaus Magnus says that the Livonian werewolves were initiated by draining a cup of specially prepared beer and repeating a set formula. Ralston in his Songs of the Russian People gives the form of incantation still familiar in Russia. It is also said that the seventh son of the seventh son will become werewolf. Another is to be directly bitten by a werewolf, where the saliva enters the bloodstream. In Galician, Portuguese and Brazilian folklore, it is the seventh of the sons, but sometimes the seventh child, a boy, after a line of 6 daughters, who becomes a werewolf. This belief was so extended in northern Argentina, where it is called the lobizon, that 7th sons were abandoned, seeded in adoption or killed. A law from 1920 decreed that the president of Argentina is the godfather of every 7th son. Thus, the state gives him a gold medal in his baptism and a scholarship until his 21st year. This ended the abandonments, but it is still traditional that the president godfather 7th sons. Various methods also existed for removing the beast shape. The simplest was the act of the enchanter, operating either on himself or on a victim, and another was the removal of the animal belt or skin. To kneel in one spot for 100 years, to be reproached with being a werewolf, to be saluted with the sign of the cross, or addressed thrice by baptismal name, to be struck 3 blows on the forehead with a knife, or to have at least 3 drops of blood drawn have also been mentioned as possible cures. Many European folk tales include throwing an iron object over or at the werewolf, to make it reveal its human form. In other cases the transformation was supposed to be accomplished by satanic agency voluntarily submitted to, and that for the most loathsome ends, in particular for the gratification of a craving for human flesh. The werewolves, writes Richard Verstegan, Restitution of Decayed Intelligence, 1628, are Satan's sorcerers, who having anointed their bodies with an ointment which they make by the instinct of the devil, and putting on a satanic gaunted girdle, does not wholly unto the view of others seem as wolves, but to their own thinking have both the shape and nature of wolves, so long as they wear the said girdle. And they do dispose themselves as very wolves in arraying and killing, and most of humane creatures. Such were the views about lycanthropy current throughout the continent of Europe when Verstegan wrote. The ointments and salves in question may have contained hallucinogenic agents. Becoming a werewolf simply by being bitten by another werewolf as a form of contagion is common in modern fiction, but rare in legend, in which werewolf attacks seldom left the victim alive to transform. This method is probably one of the worst and probably not true because it is pretty hard to believe. Not all the time does a person become a werewolf. The trait of a werewolf is probably a dominate trait, and if it's there, then it's going to be spread throughout the family. The only way this can be plausible is if one or both of the parents have the trait in them. They could have this from family history, an unknown or known curse, or any other method of getting a werewolf gene, trait, curse. Anything that caused man to change into beast. Theories of origin. A recent theory has been proposed to explain werewolf episodes in Europe in the 18th and 19th century. Ergo, which causes a form of foodborne illness, is a fungus that grows in place of rye grains in wet growing seasons after very cold winters. Ergo poisoning usually affects whole towns or at least poor areas of towns and results in hallucinations, mass hysteria and paranoia, as well as convulsions and sometimes death. LSD can be derived from ergo. Ergo poisoning has been proposed as both a cause of an individual believing that he or she is a werewolf and of a whole town believing that they had seen a werewolf. However, this theory is controversial and unsatisfactory. Witchcraft hysteria and legends of animal transformations, as well as hysteria and superstition in general, have existed across the world for all of recorded history. Even if ergo poisoning is found to be an accurate explanation in some cases, it cannot be applied to all instances. An over-reliance on any one theory denies the diversity and complexity of such occurrences. Some modern researchers have tried to use conditions such as rabies, hypertrichosis, excessive hair growth over the entire body, or porphyria, an enzyme disorder with symptoms including hallucinations and paranoia, as an explanation for werewolf beliefs, although the symptoms of those ailments do not match up well with the folklore or the evidence of the episodes of hysteria either. There is also a clinical condition called lupus, SLE, where the afflicted person may have an altered facial appearance reminiscent of a wolf, which may be relevant. There is also a rare mental disorder called clinical lycanthropy, in which an affected person has a delusional belief that he or she is transforming into another animal, although not always a wolf or werewolf. Others believe werewolf legends arose as a part of shamanism and totem animals in primitive and nature-based cultures. Template citation needed. The term therianthropy has been adopted to describe a spiritual concept in which the individual believes he or she has the spirit or soul, in whole or in part, of a non-human animal. Abilities of the werewolf. The werewolf is the perfect predator, a savage hybrid of human intelligence and animal cunning. The werewolf is extremely powerful, capable of easily ripping a man apart. The werewolf has incredible hunting and killing capabilities, possessing supernatural levels of strength, speed, agility, and endurance. The werewolf has supernatural regenerative capabilities, allowing the creature to recover from even the most grievous wounds within minutes, although whether the werewolf is capable of regrowing a severed limb is unknown. Silver inhibits the healing process, but the werewolf will eventually recover. The claws and teeth are designed for shredding flesh and snapping bones. The creature has enhanced senses of sight, smell, and hearing. It can see extremely well in the dark, and can track its prey for miles by scent alone. The werewolf is able to hear the beating heart of its prey. Basically, when a werewolf attacks, there is almost no chance of survival. The werewolf cannot be harmed by conventional weapons, as ordinary firearms and blades seem to do little more than annoy the beast. Only a silver bullet or blade can kill a werewolf. Werewolves in modern fiction. The process of transmogrification is portrayed in many films and works of literature to be painful. The resulting wolf is typically cunning but merciless, and prone to killing and eating people without compunction regardless of the moral character of the person when human. The form a werewolf takes is not always an ordinary wolf, but is often anthropomorphic or maybe otherwise larger and more powerful than an ordinary wolf. Many modern werewolves are also supposedly immune to damage caused by ordinary weapons, being vulnerable only to silver objects, usually a bullet or blade. This negative reaction to silver is sometimes so strong that the mere touch of the metal on a werewolf's skin will cause bronze. Current-day werewolf fiction almost exclusively involves lycanthropy being either a hereditary condition or being transmitted like a disease by the bite of another werewolf. More recently, the portrayal of werewolves has taken an even more sympathetic turn in some circles. With the rise of environmentalism and other back-to-nature ideals, the werewolf has come to be seen by some authors as a representation of humanity allied more closely with nature. Jack Williamson's Darker Than You Think, 1948, presents an excellent example of the disembodied or psychic projectioned werewolf. Terry Pratchett brings the sympathetic and monstrous werewolf traditions together in his Discworld series, notably The Fifth Elephant and Vud. Both novels provide some focus on Constable/Sergeant Anger and her family. J.K. Rowling has added her voice to the tradition as well with Remus Lupin and Finrod Greyback in the Harry Potter series, Books 2-6 and Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Kelly Armstrong started her Women of the Otherworld series with a female werewolf. She combined the elements of both a disease, an hereditary condition. In the Otherworld series, one could become a werewolf by bite. The werewolf gene, though, is only passed along to the male offspring. Books narrated by the werewolf Elena, so far, are bitten, stolen, and broken. No longer available for download, but soon available in book form, are the novellas that are also werewolf narrated, Savage, Ascension, Beginnings and a couple short stories in the Otherworld Tales 2005. In Len Wiseman's films Underworld and Underworld Evolution, the werewolves are portrayed as the arch-enemies of the vampire clan as well as the former slaves of the vampires. People could become werewolves by bite, though only a few would survive it. The second film also reveals that the nowadays werewolves were evoluted from their primeval form, which portrayed them as wild beasts and mercilessly killers. The films speculate the first werewolf and vampire were brothers, who were separated when Victor, one of the vampire lords, captured the werewolf and gave the order to lock him up in a dungeon. USA TV series Teenage Werewolf portrays a high school student who becomes a werewolf and uses his powers to accomplish a lot of good things as well, apart from some silly mischief. And now we welcome our guest Phil Hancock, parapsychologist. Welcome back, Phil.
Thank you, Peter, and Happy New Year, everyone.
Now let's begin, Phil. Tell us some good werewolf yarns.
And I shall. Pennsylvania 8 men. In the fall of 1973, Western Pennsylvania played host to dozens of reports of strange ape-like creatures, sometimes seen in association with UFOs, said to have, in one witness's words, fire-red eyes that glow in darkness, to be 7 to 8 feet tall, and gives off a strong, unpleasant odor. Another type of creature, investigator Stan Gordon noted, was said to be between 5 and 6 feet tall. It was described as looking just like an extremely muscular man with a covering of thick dark hair. Again, in these reports, the arms were very long and hung down past the knees. This creature appeared to have superior agility exceeding that of a deer. From footprints discovered, the stride of creatures varies between 52 and 57 inches. In these reports there was no indication of odors. The Androscoggin County werewolf. Residents of Turner, Maine are wondering if an animal found dead over the weekend may be the mysterious creature that has mauled dogs, frightened residents and been the subject of local legend for half a generation. The animal was found near power lines, apparently struck by a car. The carcass was photographed and inspected by several people who live in the area, but nobody is sure exactly what it is. For the past 15 years, residents across Androscoggin County have reported seeing and hearing a mysterious animal with chilling monstrous cries and eyes that glow in the night. The animal has been blamed for attacking and killing a Doberman Pinscher and a Rottweiler the past couple of years. Lauren Coleman, a Portland author and cryptozoologist, said it's unlikely that the animal was anybody's pet. The legend of the Converse werewolf. Converse, Texas is an old-time ranching community. Some time ago, a rancher wanted his 15-year-old son to come of age and become a man. His task was to go out into the wild and kill a deer for the family to eat. The boy went out and after a few days, still had not returned. A search party was formed to locate the boy. Sometime into the search, the rancher heard a noise in the distance. Thinking that he had found his son, he ran off in the direction of the noise. What he found was an 8-foot-tall beast that looked like a cross between a large ape and a wolf that was eating the boy. The rancher fired shots at the beast as it retreated into the woods, but it was too late to save his son. The grief-stricken rancher died shortly after, suffering from depression and a broken heart. Michigan Dogman. The Michigan Dogman is a cryptid that has reportedly been sighted throughout Michigan and gained prominence in 1987 when a radio DJ produced a song about a fabricated half-man/half-dog creature as part of an April Fool's Day prank, only to have people call the station to report that they had in fact seen a similar creature, sometimes described as part wolf. The song mentions that attacks are most likely to occur in the 7th month of the 7th year of each decade, and that July, there was an attack that was widely reported that took place near Luther, Michigan, with deep claw marks around the door and windows of a cabin as if an aggressive animal had attempted to enter the building, but officials only found dog tracks around the outside. Though popularized in 1987, the Dogman has been part of local legend for quite a while, with Ottawa and Chippewa tribes having legends of human hybrids who could shape-shift into different animals at will. Posted on cryptozoology.com. My fiancé's grandfather owns land not too far from the swamp that some say the Wolfman hangs out. I'm not from Wexford County. I'm from Iosco County off of the Ozable River. And an avid angler and outdoors man, I have seen some weird stuff. When I was hiking the Ozable in the summer of 1999, in the counties Oscoda, Algona and Iasco, I remember one of my most scariest encounters with the wilderness. While walking east down along the river around 1 hour prior to dusk, I heard what to my ears to be a wolf howl. I have seen wolf prints and seen wolves at my home at 5375 South Branch Road, Long Lake Miles, 48,743, but never have I heard a howl so deep and almost human-like in my life. I got spooked and set up camp and made a fire, larger than most, due to my fear. At dusk I heard it closer, directly across the river. I had heard stories of the wolfman from native powwows and in family folklore covering the whole USA, but never have I personally seen what I saw that night or the next day. That night, after eating beef barley stew from my canned good collection, I lay down by the fire with my huge folding knife closely gripped by my chest. I was watching and listening to the surrounding woodline for about 30 minutes. When the average noises stopped, which to me meant two things. One, something had spooked the local animals, and two, made me very uneasy. I looked out away from the fire and shot the fire away from my eyes using the UN-armed hand. I looked across the river, which was only about 100 meters across from my fire, and saw the most unnerving sight ever. On the sand was a creature standing maybe larger than the average sow black bear, with black fur, large long skull and yellow reflecting eyes like the wolf. I closed my eyes and hoped I was imagining things, and then it gave out the howl again. I opened my eyes and it ran up the bank and disappeared into the night. As it ran, it didn't run on all fours like a bear nor a wolf. And unlike the local Bigfoot, it wasn't full upright like a human or primate. I was so scared that I slept the rest of that night in a damn tree about 20 foot off the ground. It took me 3 hours and praying to ease my fear so I could sleep. The next morning I woke up and crossed downstream and hiked back to where I saw the werewolf or dogman. There in the bank I saw wolf prints about the size of a bear, an adult's paw. There were not any group of fours like if you were tracking a wolf or coyote. There were on the other hand a line of tracks separated by at least 1 yard apart between each paw print. And the paw print, unlike that of a canine, was not straightly imprinted into the sand. The print was angled into the sand as if it were balancing around 200 pounds of body weight on that single paw. I wish I had a camera with flash that night prior and for that day, to capture some proof of what I saw. As a child, my friend and I, while living in Macomb County in Memphis, Michigan, while hiking in the Memphis Youth Center farmland in Richmond Township, tracked a similar set of tracks. A few years prior, in '96, we tracked it for 4 miles to a farm where a lady had found her chicken pen torn to shreds and many chickens shredded. None of us ever mentioned these before, for fear of being called crazy. But just like many, after hearing the song about Wexford County and the incident at the Luther cabin, only has solidified my belief. I am a strong Christian and I believe in angels and demons, and the oddities that we are more occasionally seeing. Ask the Indians and the French descendants who lived in the region. Many have seen or heard such things over the many years. Though Bigfoot is more believable, I agree. But this is an occurring thing all over the Mid-South and Midwest. My mom and I have seen Bigfoot while berry picking in the woods between South Branch Road and Liberty Trail and Yakult Roads. There is a river that flows into a lake there, and there is a great big huckleberry patch there. We thought it was a bear at first, but as it came over the fire break we knew we weren't looking at a bear. So as to being a skeptic about both of these things, I can't prove either of what I heard nor saw, but I never camp without a firearm anymore.
I have also heard of the werewolves of Walesville. Records of an enormous wolf-like animal in North Wales date back to 1790. when a stagecoach travelling between Denby and Wrexham was attacked and overturned by an enormous black beast almost as long as the coach horses. The terrifying animal tore into one of the horses and killed it, while the other horse broke free from its harness and galloped off into the night. The attack took place just after dusk, with a full moon on the horizon. The moon that month seemed blood red, probably because of dust in the stratosphere from a recent forest fire in the Hatchmere area. The locals thought the moon's colour was a sign that something evil was at large, and the superstitious phrase, "bad moon on the rise," was whispered in travellers' inns across the region. In the winter of 1791, a farmer went into his snow-covered field just 7 miles east of Graysford, and he saw enormous tracks that looked like those belonging to an overgrown wolf. He followed the tracks with a blacksmith for 2 miles, and they led to a scene of mutilation which made the villagers in the area quake with fear that night. One snow-covered field was a lake of blood dotted with carcasses of sheep, cattle, and even the farmer's dog. The farmer was found locked up in his house in a terrible state. He wasn't harmed physically, but he was terrified. He had barricaded himself in after witnessing an enormous black animal that resembled a wolf ripping the throat out of his sheepdog. The animal had then gone for the farmer, but he had managed to run into the farmhouse in time. He had bolted the heavy oaken door and hid under a table in the kitchen, armed only with the pitchfork. The farmer said the wolf pounded on the heavy oak door, almost knocking it off its hinges. The weird-looking animal then stood up on its hind legs like a human and looked in through the windows of the farmhouse. Its eyes were blue and seemed intelligent and almost human-like. The beast foamed at the mouth as it peered in, then bolted from the window to commit carnage on the farm. The church set up patrols in search of what was suspected to be a werewolf, and bands of villagers braved the freezing blizzards with lanterns, muskets and pitchforks in search of the beast, but only its tracks were ever seen. 7 years later, 2 men walking across the Beer-Curtain Hills in Cheshire saw something that sent them running for their lives. They rushed into an inn and refused to continue their journey until morning. At dawn on the following day, the mutilated bodies of 2 vagrants were found in a wood just 5 miles from the inn. The attacks by the large black wolf gradually died out, and the people of Cheshire and Wales breathed a sigh of relief. But 2 centuries later, attacks by a large unidentified animal were reported again. In February 1992, a national newspaper reported sightings of a strange bear-like animal that had been seen across Wales. In the north of the country, a farmer who had spotted the animal on the night of a full moon said he had afterwards found 2 of his lambs had been killed. And in 2001, the local newspaper, the Evening Leader, ran a series of articles about sightings of big cats, like a puma in Croydon, near Mold, and Bangor-on-Dee, near Wrexham.
The Wolf of Allendale, Wolf at Large in Allendale, was the headline of the Hexham Courant on 10th December 1904. The Courant reported that in the last 3 weeks, farmers around the village of Allendale were stabling their animals at night as loss of livestock had become a serious concern. One farmer had found 2 of his sheep killed, one with its bowels hanging out. The head and horns were all that remained of another animal. Many of the unfortunate livestock had been bitten around the neck and legs, suggesting an attack by a wolf. It was suggested that the perpetrator was a grey wolf that had escaped from its owner, Captain Bairn of Shotley Bridge. However, Shotley Bridge Police Station had recorded Captain Bairn's wolf as being only 4.5 months old and not much of a danger to men or livestock. Sightings of the beast began to filter through the community. A report of an imposing-looking wolf lurking around behind Allenhead School brought a hunting party of 150 residents to the scene, some armed with guns. A search of the area found only a spot within a large drain where it was thought the beast may have slept. The Hexham Courier reported on the 17th December that on the previous Wednesday, the wolf had committed great slaughter of a flock of sheep. The wolf had been tracked by a 100-strong hunting party, but could not be driven towards the guns of the group. The following day, another hunting party, 200 strong, half of whom were armed with guns, again attempted to track the wolf, but the search proved hopeless. Further sightings, sometimes conflicting, were reported over the next several days, describing the beast as black and tan, or dun-colored. The community became unsettled. Lanterns were kept burning overnight in an attempt to ward the wolf away, and the Hexham Wolf Committee was founded to organize efforts to track down the beast, offering rewards to prospective wolf trackers. Throughout the winter, the hunt for the Allendale wolf continued. Renowned tracking dogs, the Hayden hounds, were put on the trail, but not even the prized bloodhound of the group, Monarch, could find its quarry. Charles Fort, who recorded the case in his book, Low, commented, "The whiz dog was put on what was supposed to be the trail of the wolf. But, if there weren't any wolf, who can blame a celebrated bloodhound for not smelling something that wasn't?" The Wolf Committee persevered and hired Mr. W. Brydick, a skilled Indian game hunter. Mr. Brydick was interviewed by the Newcastle Evening Chronicle, stating that he would find the Allendale wolf on scientific lines. Despite his experience and scientific pretensions, Brydick was unable to track down the animal. Despite the lack of success in tracking down their wolf, the locals adopted the continuing search as part of their folklore. Hunt days soon took on a sense of occasion, complete with fancy dress and sing-songs. Throughout December and over Christmas, the search continued. The wolf was witnessed jumping over a high wall to escape 2 men, and the following day it was seen attacking a black-faced Jew. One afternoon in late December, the wolf was encountered by a group of women and children, whose screams startled and scared the wolf away. In 1905, a corpse of a wolf was found on a railway track in Comwinton, Cumbria, some 30 miles west of Hexham. The Hexham Courier on the 7th January reported that the corpse was not that of the wolf of Allendale, and the Wolf Committee claimed the beast was still at large. It was suggested that there was perhaps an entire family of predators living in the Allendale woods, which does offer an explanation as to why there had been differing descriptions of the animal. By the end of January 1905, reports of the wolf began to wane, culminating with a succinct report of a wolf sighted with a snare attached to its leg. Eventually, the sightings and livestock killings ceased altogether. Wisconsin werewolves. One of the first Wisconsin werewolf sightings occurred in 1936. A man named Mark Chatkelman reportedly encountering a talking wolfman just east of Jefferson, Wisconsin on Highway 18. As he was driving along the road one evening, he spotted a figure digging in an old Indian mound. He looked closer and saw that the figure was a strange, hair-covered creature that stood erect and stood more than 6 feet tall. The face of the creature boasted a muzzle and features of both an ape and a dog. Its hands were oddly formed with a twisted thumb and 3 fully formed fingers. The beast gave off a putrid smell that was like decaying meat. Chatkelman returned to the site the following evening, hoping for another look, and this time he actually heard the creature speak in what he described as being neo-human. The beast uttered a 3-syllable growling noise that sounded like Gadara, with the emphasis on the 2nd syllable. Chatkelman was a religious man, and after spotting this obviously evil creature, he began to back away from it and to pray. Eventually the creature was lost to sight. But did it turn up again? In 1964, another man, Dennis Fewless, had a similar sighting less than 2 miles away. Fewless was driving home around midnight from his job at the Admiral Television Corporation in Harvard, Illinois. After turning onto Highway 89 from Highway 14, his headlights caught an animal running across the road in front of him. It was dark brown in color, and he estimated that it weighed between 400 and 500 pounds. He also described it as being 7 or 8 feet tall. It ran across the highway, jumped a barbed wire fence and vanished. Fuelers returned to the spot in the daylight hours to look for footprints or other evidence, but the hard, sun-dried ground offered nothing. They did find where the corn had been pushed aside as the beast entered the field, though. "I was awful scared that night," Fuelers told author J. Roth. "That was no man. It was all hairy from head to feet." In 1972, a werewolf returned to Wisconsin. One night, a woman in rural Jefferson County called the police to report an attempted break-in at her home. According to an investigation conducted by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, she said that the intruder was a large, unknown animal that had come to the house and had tried to get in the door. The creature departed but returned again a few weeks later and injured one of her farm animals. The account stated that the creature had long, dark hair, stood about 8 feet tall and walked upright like a man. Its arms were long and it had claws on each hand. After trying to enter the house, the beast went out to the barn and attacked a horse that was stabled there. It left behind a deep gash on the animal that stretched from one shoulder to the other. A footprint left behind was more than a foot long. Bigfoot investigators dismissed the report, saying that a Sasquatch would never be that aggressive. But what about a werewolf? Perhaps the most celebrated and strange werewolf reports of recent years again come from Wisconsin and involve what has been dubbed the Bray Road Beast. The first public sighting of the monster occurred on October 31, 1999, when 18-year-old Aristian Jip, son of Elkhorn, was driving along Bray Road near Delavan. As she neared the intersection of Hospital Road, she felt her right front tire jump off the ground as if she had hit something. She stopped the car and peered into the darkness to see a dark, hairy form racing toward her. She jumped back into the car and was attempting to drive away when the beast jumped onto her trunk. Luckily, it was too wet for the creature to hang on and it fell off onto the pavement. Daristian returned to the site later on that evening with a young girl that she was taking out trick-or-treating and saw a large form on the side of the road. She told about her encounter the next day, and as word spread, more local people began to step forward with their own encounters with the beast, dating back to 1989. One night in the fall of that year, Lorian Endrizzi was rounding a curve on Bray Road, just a half-mile from the site of the later incident, and saw what she thought was a person hunched over on the side of the road. When she slowed down, she took a closer look at the figure on the passenger side of the car. She was no more than 6 feet away from it at the time. The sighting lasted for about 45 seconds, and she stated that she clearly saw a beast with greyish, brown hair, fangs and pointed ears. His face was long and snouty, like a wolf. The creature also had glowing yellow eyes. She reported that she had no idea what this thing could have been until she saw a book at the library that had an illustration of a werewolf in it. Around the same time period, a dairy farmer from Elkhorn, near Delavan, named Scott Bray reported seeing a strange-looking dog in his pasture near Bray Road. He said that the beast was larger and taller than a German shepherd and had pointed ears, a hair tail and long grey and black hair. He added that it was built very heavy in the front, as if it had a strong chest. He followed the dog to a large pile of rocks, but the creature had vanished. He did find that it had left behind huge footprints, though, which disappeared into the grass of the pasture. The sightings continued and added up to a number of bizarre encounters between 1989 and 1992. The creature resembled no known animals, but alternately was compared to dogs, bears and wolves. According to Jerome Clark, Dan Grosvenor of the International Wolf Research Center in Ely, Minnesota, stated that the creature could not be a wild wolf. To further complicate matters, all sorts of other sightings in the region also began to pour in, including Bigfoot-like creatures, animal mutilations, and men in black. As seems to be the case during most Fortean Flats, all matter of high strangeness began to filter into the area.
There's also the famous case known as the Werewolf of Skinwalker Ranch. When a rancher bought the ranch in 1994, it had been vacant for 7 or 8 years. The rancher, his wife and 2 kids were curious about the impressive array of bolts that covered the doors and windows of the main house. There were deadbolts on both sides of the doors. Even the kitchen cabinets had bolts on them. And at both ends of the house, iron stakes and heavy chains had been installed. The rancher guessed the previous tenants had positioned large guard dogs in the front and back of the home, but he had no idea why. On the day the family moved their furnishings onto the property, they had their first foreshadowing of the events that would follow. They spotted an extremely large wolf out in the pasture. The wolf cautiously made its way across the field and, to the surprise of everyone, sidled up to the family, acting like it was a familiar pet. It had rained that day, and the family remembers the wolf smelled like a wet dog as they were petting it. After a few minutes, the wolf strolled over to the corral and grabbed a calf by its snout, attempting to pull it through the corral bars. The rancher and his father began beating on the wolf's back with sticks, but it wouldn't release the calf. The rancher grabbed a .357 Magnum from his truck and shot the wolf at point-blank range. The slug had no noticeable effect. The rancher pumped another bullet into the wolf, which then let go of the calf but stood looking at the family as if nothing had happened. The rancher shot it 2 more times with the powerful handgun. The big animal backed off a bit, but showed no signs of distress, not even any blood. The mystified rancher retrieved a hunting rifle and shot the wolf again, once more at close range. The rancher is not only an experienced marksman but a big game hunter of considerable repute. 5 slugs should have been enough to bring down an elk, let alone a wolf. The 5th shot caused a chunk of hair and flesh to fly off the wolf, but it still didn't seem fazed. After a 6th shot, the wolf casually trotted across the field into a muddy thicket. The rancher and his father tracked the beast for about a mile, following its paw prints through the mud, but the tracks suddenly ended, as if the wolf had simply vanished into thin air. Returning to the corral area, the rancher examined the chunk of wolf flesh and says it looked and smelled like rotten meat. He made inquiries among his neighbors, but no one seemed to know anything about any tame, oversized wolves in the area. A few weeks later, the rancher's wife encountered a wolf that was so large, its back was parallel with the top of her window as it stood beside her car. The wolf was accompanied by a dog-like animal that she couldn't identify. Over the next 2 years, a menagerie of weird animals was reported by family members and neighbors. While driving into the ranch on a bright afternoon, the rancher and his wife saw something attacking one of their horses. They described it as low to the ground, heavily muscled, weighing perhaps 200 pounds, with curly red hair and a bushy tail. It somewhat resembled a muscular hyena and seemed to be clawing at their horse, almost playing with it. The rancher got within 40 feet of the animal but says it literally vanished before his eyes. Poof. Gone. They checked the horse and found numerous claw marks on its legs. A few months later, the wife of a deputy sheriff reported seeing a similar muscular, reddish beast running across the property. Another visitor to the ranch had a more ominous encounter in the middle homestead, the same place where I was set out as bait. The visitor, along with the rancher and his son, said they saw a large blurry something moving through the trees. The visitor has been meditating when this thing showed up. It swiftly moved from the trees, across the pasture, covering 100 yards in seconds, and when it reached the man, it let out a ferocious roar, something akin to a large bear, a roar loud enough to be heard hundreds of yards away. But this was no bear. It was nearly invisible, resembling the camouflaged being in the movie Predator. The visitor was so scared, he grabbed onto the rancher and wouldn't let go. He left the ranch and has never returned. Other creatures and beings were also seen, including exotic, multicolored birds that were certainly not native to the region and could not be identified. There were numerous close encounters with dark, 9-foot-tall beasts that resembled a Bigfoot or Sasquatch. As if those visual experiences weren't enough, the family claims its other senses were also challenged by assorted weird events. They often were overwhelmed by strong musk odors. The pastures would unexplainably light up at night like a football stadium. They claimed to have seen shafts of light that seemingly emanated from the ground. They, and others, say they heard what sounded like heavy machinery operating under the earth. And they heard voices. Tom, his son, and his nephew remember hearing a loud, disembodied conversation in some unintelligible language. The disembodied male voices spoke in what the witnesses say was a mocking tone and sounded like they were emanating from 20 or more feet above their heads, but they saw nothing. The dogs accompanying the 3 witnesses growled and barked at the voices, then took off in a panic. There were physical manifestations that aren't easily explained. While checking on his herd in the 3rd homestead, the rancher noticed that someone had dug up his pasture. Hundreds of pounds of soil had been scooped out of the ground. The edges of the hole resembled perfect, concentric circles, as if someone had dropped a gigantic cookie cutter on the pasture. Several smaller scoop marks were also found. The rancher also reported phenomena similar to crop circles. One formation found in their pasture consisted of 3 circles of flattened grass. Each circle was approximately 8 feet in diameter, and they were arranged in a triangular pattern, with each circle about 30 feet from the others. Keep in mind, there is only one road leading into the ranch. Anyone coming in or going out would almost certainly be noticed by them or their neighbors.
The werewolf of Enrico County. It seems there's a werewolf, or at least that would be my guess, roaming around Enrico Company in Verena, in the Confederate Hills Recreation Center located at 302 Lee Avenue, Highland Springs, the 23,075. It is a well-known local legend, although no one seems to know about its origins. It is only seen during the full moon and has been known to howl. It also chases people, although it has never killed or hurt any humans. It is 6 feet tall and is covered in a grayish-white hair. It can stand on its hind legs or run on all 4 legs. It has a human-like body but a face like an animal, particularly wolf-like. Update. This is from eyewitness, a woman named Verena who had quite an amazing experience. After reading the stories of the werewolf of Enrico County, Verena, I thought I would contribute some odd experiences that happened to myself and my husband. My husband used to live with his parents on Old Osborne Turnpike, and their house is right next to the Battlefield Park. They have a large backyard, unfenced, with the field going back about 100 yards and woods behind it, which continue into the park. When we first started dating, he was living there and I would come to visit him and stay over some nights. We would go behind his house and sit on a picnic table to smoke, because we couldn't smoke in the house. There were many nights, usually very late, about 2 or 3 in the morning, when we would sit outside and hear awful howling noises. It sounded like maybe dogs, but I have never heard a dog make sounds like that. A lot of times it creeped us out so much we would put our cigarettes out and rush back into the house. Another time, in broad daylight, we went outside to smoke and were sitting on the picnic table. All of a sudden, we saw a pack of white dog/wolf things coming toward us. They weren't running or anything, just slowly making their way across his neighbors' backyards toward us. Those dog things came into his backyard and walked across the yard, right in front of us. There was something not right about them. They seemed to be in some sort of trance. They didn't seem to notice us at all. They just walked right across the yard, across the field, toward the neighbor's yard on the other side. This experience is one of the weirdest things that's ever happened to me, because we had no way of explaining where they had come from, what they were, or what they were doing. Another experience has become a kind of family legend in my husband's family. This happened about 9 years ago. His family has a pet cat that they used to let outside before this happened, that is. It was my husband's father's birthday, and they had let the cat outside a while before. They were all sitting around the table, eating birthday cake, when they heard something crash into the glass back door. They rushed out to see what the noise was, and they found the cat laying on the ground, covered in crap, and I literally mean crap. Apparently, my husband's mom made a joke that a bear had found the cat and wiped his butt with it and threw it against the house. That was the only thing they could come up with to explain the event. Needless to say, the cat is an indoor cat now. Lots of other weird stuff happens around there, but these are the only incidents that might be related to the werewolf. When I told my husband about the story I read on your site, he got really creeped out and said, that would explain a lot.
It is the interesting case of the werewolf of Defiance, Ohio. Some people here are jokingly referring to it as the case of the werewolf, but Defiance police are serious about it. 3 persons have told police that they saw a large beast that resembles a werewolf lurking along railroad tracks near downtown Defiance in the last week. In each case he was spotted during the early morning hours, and one man, a train crewman switching trains, said that he was approached from behind and was struck on the shoulder with a piece of 2x4 lumber. But when we ran, the werewolf also disappeared into some nearby brush. In the other reported incidents, the werewolf was seen by another train crewman about 3 am. Police say the third report came from a motorist who said it ran in front of his car about 4 am and then quickly disappeared. We don't know what to think, Chief Donald Breckler said. We didn't release it to the news media when we got the first report about a week ago, but now we're taking it seriously. We're concerned for the safety of our people. Chief Breckler said that descriptions of the werewolf given by the 3 persons, police are not giving their names, that spotted him are similar, but he admits in each case the description is vague. Very hairy is the first description given by each person who saw the werewolf. The chief said that he thinks that the person is wearing some disguise such as a mask. But there is a lot of natural hair too, he said. I'm inclined to think it might be a local person, Chief Breckler said. None of the other area towns have had anything like this, and in each case he has been seen in the same area of our town. Chief Breckler said that the creature wears dark clothing and at first reports described him as ranging from 7 to 9 feet tall. But that was a little exaggerated, the chief said. 2 of the trainmen that reported seeing the werewolf work in the area during the early morning hours. Both of them are from Toledo. The third complaint came from a local grocery store employee, Mr. Breckler said. If his motive is robbery, then he is not picking on the type of person that would have a lot of money, Chief Breckler said. We don't know what his motive is. A railroad agent at the Norfolk and Western Depot on 5th Street here said that the switching crewmen from Toldo are the only persons that have spotted the werewolf. The agent, who did not identify himself, said that none of the other crewmen in the area seemed disturbed by reports. We don't think it is a prank, Chief Breckler said. He's coming at people with a club in his hand. We think it's to the safety of our people to be concerned. Creature described as having fangs. 2N&W brakeman, interviewed at the railroad's Sumner Street yard today, said the creature had huge hay feet, fangs, and ran from side to side like a caveman in the movies. Ted Davis and Tom Jones, crewmen on the N&W local freight which serves Defiant on an overnight run, said that the large figure, which they said was between 6 and 8 feet tall, has appeared twice under a full moon. When we leave here the moon is usually about a quarter full, but about 4 when we're working Defiance, the moon is full, Mr. Davis explained. The creature was first seen July 25, and then again last Sunday, both men said. When he first confronted Mr. Davis, the creature ran away before he, Mr. Davis, could say anything. I was connecting an air hose between 2 cars and was looking down. I saw these huge hairy feet, then I looked up and he was standing there with that big stick over his shoulder. When I started to say something, he took off for the woods. Both Mr. Davis and Mr. Jones saw the blue jean-clad figure again last Sunday morning in the yards. The creature was standing in some weeds near the main track. At first I thought the whole thing was a big joke, but when I saw how hairy and woolly it was, that was enough for me, Mr. Jones said. He had laughed at Mr. Davis earlier in the week, but said that when he could account for all the railroad workers at the time, he knew it was not a crewman's joke. When they took off, Mr. Jones said he and Mr. Davis also heard screams from a car stopped on a nearby road. That thing's going to hurt somebody someday, he said.
Were jackals of the Congo in the 1930s perched hidden in a tree, an English physician witnessed a very special ceremony. It started with the beating of drums, then the Nyanga, witch doctor, covered in the skin of a jackal, jumped into the center of the crowd and began to chant. The chanting grew louder, and the energy of the crowd grew as well. In the middle of the circle, the Nyanga prepared a potion, and, as the silence came to a halt, he drank the potion and unleashed the cry of a jackal. The Nyanga worked himself into a frenzy beyond his physical ability, and then fell into a trance. During the trance, a man and woman jumped into the circle and performed a dance which became increasingly animal-like as it progressed. Then, in an instant, the two turned into jackals before the physician's very eyes. The Tallbot County werewolf, the only werewolf in Georgia's history, is said to be buried in O'Neill's district in Tallbot County. Some of the older citizens can tell the story of the unlikely person who could turn into a werewolf at will to maraud among the sheep. Local residents complained that many of their sheep were being attacked, even with several guards standing post. And the dead sheep were never eaten by their attacker. It seemed to kill simply for the joy of killing. The species of the animal was unknown. Some thought that it may be a grey wolf, but the animal's tracks were not like those of a grey wolf. Landowners began to increase security. They made new traps. More guards were placed over the sheep at night. Professional hunters were brought in and new rifles were purchased. They were never able to kill the creature. A couple of times a hunter was able to shoot the animal from a distance but could not bring it down. One farmer that had suffered more extensive losses than the others swore that he would kill the animal. He offered a $200 reward to anyone that killed it. One day the farmer received a note asking him to go to the farm of a new settler. The farmer did as the note said and he met the new settler. The person who had sent the note was a hard-working and religious man. Back home in Bohemia, we had this same problem. People lose their sheep for months until someone nearby tells us of the werewolf legend. The werewolf loves to kill for fun, just to taste the blood. So we villagers did the same thing I'm asking you to do. Here is my silver cross. Take it and melt it into the shape of a bullet. It is the only way a werewolf can be stopped. The farmer melted down the cross and fitted it into his own rifle. He sat with his flock to wait for the animal. He wasn't kept waiting for long. On the second night, the beast came to the flock he was guarding and began its nightly slaughter. He took aim at the animal and fired. The animal cried out a piercing scream, but it sounded more like the sound of a woman screaming than an animal. The farmer ran to check to see if he had killed it, but it was nowhere to be found. Instead, however, he found the left front foot of the beast, where the silver bullet had cleanly sliced it off. The slaughters stopped from then on. It was not until years later that the town doctor revealed on the very night of the shot he had bandaged a young woman's arm for what looked like the damage from a bullet which had taken off her entire hand and wrist.
Well, that is all the time we have tonight for this episode of Frater SH's Night Show. I thank you again, Phil, for coming on the show.
It was a pleasure, Peter, and thank you.
That is all for Frater SH's Night Show. I'm Sir Peter Pendragon saying good night and good luck.